There. That distortion, see it?
Yes, sir. It's getting larger as we close in.
Opinion, Mr. Super.
I think it's an energy surge.
Enough energy to hide a ship, would you say? A cloaking device.
Red alert, Mr. Scott.
Aye, sir.
All power to the weapon systems.
Aye, sir.
My guess is right. They'll have to decloak before they can fire.
Klingon Bird of Prey, sir. She's arming torpedoes.
Fire, Mr. Scott.
The Settled Systems, a collection of intricate skyboxes. These are the voyages of the Starship Frontier. Its 40 to 50-hour mission to explore a minuscule portion of 1,000 planets, with far fewer unique points of interest. To boldly go to New Game Plus. What's up, shipbuilders? Today we're going to build a couple of the most iconic sci-fi ships. The Enterprise, the Klingon Bird of Prey, the Romulan Warbird, and the Borg Cube. And as with all my ship builds, not only do I try and meet or match the aesthetic, but also make them the most powerful versions with the best ship parts in the game. So I can't wait to share them with you. They're all very different and some of my most difficult, intricate builds yet. So let's jump in. We're going to start with the Enterprise, and for this I use the Pinch 8Z reactor. It has the max 40 power points, which is the highest you can attain, and a decent health value. Not as high as the Pinch 8A reactor, but with the 8A you give up some power points there, so I went with the 8Z for this build. The grav drive is the J52, not because I so much care about all that jump thrust, but to me it represents kind of that navigation dish on the front of the Enterprise pretty well. And we've got the Assurance shield, which is the highest shield health in the game. And we'll see that later. I've kind of hidden that away underneath the saucer of the ship. For the engines, it's a bit of a mix. I've got the supernovas on the back, but actually tucked underneath are these SAE 5660s. I've got two of those because they have such a great engine thrust and maneuvering thrust per mass ratio, and just those two supernovas on the back, while they fit the look of those nacelles really nicely, they don't provide much thrust to mass, and so I wanted a little bit more so I could put more cargo and still have some mobility on this ship. For the weapons loadout, I've got 3 of these 280C missile launchers. They do a ton of burst damage, and they approximate my photon torpedoes pretty well. And then particle beams, the Vanguard Obliterator, auto projectors, and the PBO 175s. For my phasers, those just mop the floors with enemy ships. So for the detailed build, I broke this out into layers. It's a bit confusing, but we'll go one section at a time. Starting with the very bottom here. So you'll see I've got the grav drive on the front. And it's got a equipment plate to mount that missile launcher to. And then behind that, the Deimos hull and some habs. We'll do an interior walkthrough later in the video, but for now you can choose whatever habs you'd like. Underneath those are the N20 landing gear, which you can get from Titan. They have one of the highest landing thrusts in the game. And then the landing bay. The landing bay I used to have on the very back, flipped backwards, but I found at some shipyards it would actually spawn me, glitch me underneath because the ship is so big, and so I put it in the middle just to avoid that, but it's up to you. Along either side, you'll see you've got these M50 Ulysses fuel tanks. These are some of the most efficient fuel tanks in the game, but we have way too many. We don't need this much fuel. The reason we did this is just for the look of the ship, and so it's a lot of mass that we really don't need, but it gets us the rounded look that we're going for, which is why I used all of these. Now, for the supports, the structural pieces that hold the nacelles, I've got a lot of these Taio midcaps, but tucked underneath are the smaller variant of the N20 landing gear, just to get a bit more landing thrust to hold more cargo. Now, if you don't have much cargo, you wouldn't necessarily need these, but we'll talk about cargo in a little bit. And then to get kind of the diagonal struts, we're just using a bunch of these Taio midcaps flipped in various orientations to try to approximate a diagonal, since we can't build on one, at least not yet, hopefully. Hopefully that's coming. So that gets us our diagonal up to the nacelles. And for the nacelles themselves, to get the rounded look, I actually went with these Taio halves. You'll see I've got a bottom here, two of these bottom ones, 1x1s, and then a top 3x3, and these are both the Type A versions. Type A are rounded on the sides. They don't have connector points on the sides, which gives them a cleaner, rounded look. The Type B versions do have connector points, but you don't get as rounded of a look. So the other side is just the same. A bunch of these Taio midcaps, flipped in various orientations to work our way up. And then the Taio halves, again the A versions. And you'll see I've colored these with kind of a tertiary colorway of that light blue, just to approximate kind of the energy of the nacelles, but you know, you can do whatever you want there, obviously. Sometimes your crew does spawn into those halves. You can't get into those with your character. I find that kind of nice, actually, because that means I don't have to listen to them as much if they do spawn there. That's just something to take note of if that happens to you. Moving on to what I call the neck of the ship here. Now, again, we can't build on a diagonal, so we're approximating that with these Deimos pieces, the cowling and the belly piece. And then on either side of the hab, we've got these side caps of Taio. These are actually the Type B versions, because these have mounts on the side, which is what we want, so we can put the missile launchers on those. Gives us some extra weapon mounts to put our photon torpedoes on. Now, as you can already tell, there are going to be some ladders in this ship. It's just unavoidable. Like I said, we'll do an interior walkthrough later on, so you can see what that looks like. It is a pretty easy ship to get around in, not really going to get lost, but you do have some ladders to deal with. And that's until we get stairs for these plain vanilla builds. That's just the way it is. So again, a couple of these Deimos belly pieces to get the diagonal. Some more of these Taio side cap Bs. And I've got a window on the back just because this is a fun ship to look out on and over. It's pretty imposing, and so it's a good one in that regard. Now we're on to the main saucer of our ship, and for this, you see this holds the reactor. Our reactor is going to sit right about here, just so you can kind of visualize that. And it's got halves on either side. Again, so we got to make our way up to the bridge. Again, the choice of halves is yours. I suppose if you really wanted to look up the schematics of the Enterprise online, you could probably better approximate the actual layout and what halves go where. That's up to you. So those will sit right about there. And then we've got on either side of those halves, to start to get our rounded shape, these Nova cowlings flipped backwards, one on either side. And then some more of these Taio midcaps. So this is a real workhorse piece for us on this build, just to get us a rounded shape here. And another Nova cowling to get us that front rounded shape. You'll notice here we've got, you can see the shield generator and our two SAE 5660s. We've also got some of these weapons mounted underneath the shroud pieces here. Again, these extra engines are just to get some extra thrust to try to keep our mobility up. Unfortunately, you can't build anything right behind them. They're a bit too long for that. But with this hab and what the shield sits on, you could put, cargo in behind that, or a longer 2x1 or even a 3x1 if you wanted to replace that other companionway. That's up to you, what you do there. For the top layer of our saucer here, we've got these shroud cap pieces, and these really complete kind of the overall rounded shape of the ship. So we'll use a bunch of those flipped in various orientations. I did use some of these initially, these shroud cap pieces on the front instead of these nose pieces that you'll see, because those three shroud nose pieces give it just a straight cut look, which isn't quite as round as we would like. But I actually preferred that over the other shroud pieces because it kind of looked like more of a duck bill than it even does now. So up to you how you best make that the rounded shape with the tools we have. I felt like this was the best option, but again, up to you. And I put a couple of windows on the top just for fun on those habs. Again, use whatever habs you'd like. And then finally the bridge, this Ares bridge, you can get this from Deimos. This is one of the higher versions with a lot of cargo. You can get a lower version, save a bit of mass if you'd like to. And our docker in the last hab gets us up to the bridge. And that finishes the build. Now there are a couple variations that I'm going to show you here. You'll see we don't actually have that much cargo space in how we've currently built this. And that's because in order to get almost max mobility, we got to keep our weight down with all those fuel tanks that we used. And the supernovas in particular don't get us a bunch of maneuvering thrust, so we don't have much to play with there. But if you wanted more cargo, you could actually replace these Taio midcaps that we've used so many of. You could replace those with this Galleon S202 cargo hold, which has almost the identical shape. Just flip it upside down and put that where those midcaps used to be, and you can quickly build up a bunch of cargo. Now eventually you'll run out of landing thrust. It'll give you an error and say you'll need more landing gear, so you're going to be limited by that, and also just how low you want your mobility to go. If you did swap out the supernovas for a different type of engine, you'd probably get better mobility, but I thought the look of the supernovas was preferable in this case. And another variation you might want to consider is if you want what I would call the next generation version of the Enterprise, instead of building on the diagonal for these struts that get you up to the nacelles, we'll delete those pieces, move this out of the way a little bit, and we'll make more of that L shape that that version of the Enterprise has. And so to do that, we're going to get a couple of these HopeTech risers. We actually are also, we're going to want actually one of these Taio midcaps to go on the bottom of that, just to make that L connection that we need. And then a Stroud, this Stroud engine bracer on the side. And so that's what's going to give us the L shape. Now we'll get rid of this landing gear because we don't need it with this current mass of our ship. And you'll see this can connect right here on the side, and we can put the nacelle on top of that. And actually, as I look at this, it needs to sit down a little bit lower. So we're going to move the landing bay, flip it backwards. Let's move our landing gear up because those have connector points on the sides that we need here. And now we can connect this. Where we want it to be. Now we have moved it back a little bit, so we're going to need to shorten it. So we'll get rid of those two, shorten it by 1, and we'll just get another Taio Hab top A piece, but this time a 2x1. And this will sit right on top like that. Put that up too high. I want to lower that, which now that I moved it back 1, I'm going to need to move the bay, the landing bay again. So move it back to where it was. But because we're a little bit closer to the body of the ship, we had to make it a little bit shorter. The nacelle a bit shorter, and there it is. Now it can kind of sit down where it needs to sit. So you see the difference. Up to you which version you want to go with. Neither is perfect. The other thing we can put here to kind of keep that rounded shape of the body is this Nova cowling. That'll just fit right on top and blends in nicely with the other rounded fuel tanks there. So one more time to see that, we'll get rid of these mid-caps, get rid of that landing gear, we'll keep one of these, and let's copy a riser, and let's copy the engine bracer, move that fuel tank forward. And this can attach down to the side of the landing gear. Just like that. Now we do need to make this a little bit shorter. Let's copy these colors first. So I've got a good colorway here. There we go. Let's make a copy of that. And there's the other version. So, up to you which one you'd like better. A couple different ways to build the Enterprise. There's a lot of different versions I know over the years. These are the two ones that stick out in my mind the most. And this is just a great overall ship for the main Constellation quest line. Now let's take a look at the interior. If we can get Barrett out of the way here. You see it's a pretty imposing ship just sitting on a landing pad or just on a planet. And you can walk straight up to the landing bay even though it's underneath like this. It looks like you might hit your head, but it works just fine. And better, in my experience, than glitching underneath the ground when I had it flipped backwards on the back. But because the landing bay brings you in kind of to the middle of the body of the ship, you actually turn around and you get into the armory, at least where I have the armory. Put a 2x1 on the back. And then I've got the engineering hab, 3x1. That's what you actually enter into here. And so we'll walk through this, and this brings us to our first ladder. Brings us through a 1x1 here with nothing really going on. And then up to our first stop, which is our workshop. And then we've got another ladder. Bring us up again. This will bring us up into another 1x1. But from here, we've got some halves on each side. So we can put whatever halves you want. Here we've got sick bay. And again, these windows looking out I think are just the best. So it's a cool ship to look at. Kind of in the bottom level of our saucer, basically right now. And then I've got a captain's quarters back here. On the other side. And then go up to the top layer of our saucer, if you will. Got a computer core, living quarters, and a control center over here to get extra crew spaces. And finally, if we climb to the very top, this is how we get to the bridge. So we're in our 1x1. This is also where our docker ladder is located. I've got a bunch of windows all on every side of this 1x1. And that brings us to the Ares Bridge. I do think that this bridge best approximates the Enterprise bridge of all of them from an interior perspective. As with all these halves in the cockpit, it's a personal choice. Go with what you think fits best. And enjoy this ship. Alright, let's talk about the Bird of Prey. This one was a fun one to build, and it's a fun one to fly. To start, I've got this Class B mag inertial reactor, one of the best reactors, 39 power points out of a max 40, and really lightweight, being a Class B reactor. And so that sets this ship up to be pretty powerful. Grav drive, if you've watched my prior videos, you know I picked the lightest weight grav drive that gets me at least 28 light years of jump range. And the Vanguard Bulwark shield, also lightweight, but third highest shield health in the game. For the engines, I've got 3 of these SAE 5660s. These are some of the best engine thrust and maneuvering thrust to mass ratio engines in the game. I've only got 3 of them for this one, which actually lets me allocate fewer reactor power points, giving me additional reactor power to put to my weapons, while still giving me their same max top speed and max mobility. For weapons, I've got the Infiltrator SCO2 missile launchers. These are Class A missile launchers, but their DPS output is actually one of the highest, and they've got a large magazine. And then, again, particle beams, obliterator auto projectors, and PBO 175s. This is just a deadly loadout. Now, this ship was a lot of fun to build, a bit complicated too, so bear with me, we'll go one section at a time. And we'll start with the landing bay. The ship bed 200 flipped backwards. So you'd enter from the back, come into a 1x1 companionway, and the Deimos belly on the front of that. You'll see underneath that 1x1 I do have the slim docker, so we're hiding that underneath, which is nice. And then on either side we've got these weapon mounts with our missile launchers. And so the missile launchers do fire from underneath, just like the Bird of Prey would. Now coming up from the 1x1, I've got a 2x2, in my case an armory. And then on the back, the reactor and that Tayo cowling flipped backwards and upside down. Coming up from the 2x2, we've got another one, this time the workshop. again, you can use whatever halves you like. On either side of the workshop, I've got these Taio side caps, and we'll see why I put these on in a minute. They kind of fill up some space. We've got our shield on top, and then the grav drive right on top of the reactor. So this is the main body here. You'll see I've got another 2x1, this time a control station to get some more crew slots. And on top of that, the cowling. We'll move those together. And then on the very front, I've got the Ares bridge you can get from Deimos, and then a Deimos belly and that Taio piece connected underneath to give it kind of that rounded look. So again, go to the Deimos shipyard to get that bridge. And that's the main spine of our ship. Now let's look at the wings. And this is where things get a bit more complicated. Now we do have, again, these 3 SAE 5660s on the back, and the 2 on the side have these Deimos spine pieces that just sit on the top. So we'll put those on the back. Those sit right behind the grav drive. Let's move this, kind of line it up with our wings here. Now, this the Stroud cap piece doesn't connect to the body, it actually connects to the engine. You'll see. So the engines kind of hold our wings on. And then I've got these little Deimos wing pieces connected to the Taio mid caps. Those sit, yep, right there on the front. And then the nose cap here. And so this is why I put those side cap Taio pieces on the side of our halves, to fill up that little bit of space between the nose caps and the hab. And then another Deimos spine piece to make that kind of seam going down the back. Same thing on the other side. Stroud cap flipped upside down. Deimos spine. A Deimos wing connected to the Taio mid cap. And you'll see the Taio nose cap on the front. So this is what our wings will build off of. Now another Stroud cap, just oriented backwards. And here's some cargo. So this approximately looks like those other Taio pieces in shape, but actually gets us some cargo as well, which is nice. And we've got the wings continued here, just the Nova cowling and the Stroud cap flipped upside down give us the main connector points. And another Stroud off of that. So we just kind of alternate these Stroud cap pieces, one upside down and the other right side up, to work our way down the wing. See how that connects. And these other pieces just connect off of it. And that gives us a bit of a wing shape as we work our way down each side. And we also wanted the wings to be kind of swept forward a little bit, and so we're working our way forward towards the front of the ship too as we go. And here's our landing gear. So we had to find a tricky way to get our landing gear on this ship. So we've got these Acculanders that have some connection points on each side, and then our fuel, these Ulysses helium-3 tanks. Now, not a ton of fuel on this ship. I have a max astrodynamic skill for my character, so I don't need that much. You could also put Sarah Morgan on your crew, and her skill set will lower the fuel requirements needed as well. Now for my weapons, I've got this Hope Tech radiator that I thought looked cool on the front, right behind the Nova weapon mount that has most of the Vanguard Obliterators and the PBO 175s. You'll see I've also got one Vanguard Obliterator kind of on the back of the wing too. And so all the weapons, all the particle beam weapons fire from the wing like they should. Now it's the same thing on the other side. Again, these Stroud cap pieces do a majority of the work. And so we'll start with this one that's oriented backwards, and our cargo piece connects to that. This Stroud Cap A flipped upside down connects to those and lets us continue to build the wing down and forward. So you see this Stroud Cap A just connects to the other Stroud Cap A that's flipped upside down. And on down we go. A couple more landing gear. These Hope Tech nose pieces, kind of these little bumpers, just give us a bit more rounded shape, not so abrupt. And we'll finish it off the same way. The Stroud Cap B and the Deimos spine piece with that, with the Vanguard Obliterator on top. And then our weapons. And that's it. This one's a ton of fun to fly, looks cool, super deadly, especially not having to allocate 12 power points to the engines but still getting max mobility and top speed. Makes this a deadly ship. Now let's talk about the Romulan Warbird. After having built the Bird of Prey, I thought, well, it'll be easy. Convert that into a Warbird. I could not have been more wrong. This was one of my more intricate builds, and trying to get this to look just right was very difficult. I am pleased with how it turned out, but it's a complicated build, so we're going to walk through it in detail. Now to start, again I'm using the MAG inertial reactor, Class B, 39 power points out of a max 40, and low mass. Similar grav drive gets me up to that 28 light years of jump range, but low weight. And the Vanguard Bulwark Shield, third highest shield health, also Class B, so it's low weight as well. For the engines, I've got 6 of these SA-4330s. These are some of the most efficient engines in the game from a thrust to mass ratio, and as you can see, you can stack them one in front of the next, which you can't do with most other engines. So I can fit the max 6 of them in, which gives me even more maneuvering thrust. The weapon loadout, similar to the Bird of Prey, these infiltrator missile launchers, which have some of the highest DPS of any missiles in the game, and the PBO-175 auto helion beams, and the Vanguard Obliterator auto projectors. Just a deadly loadout all around. Now for the detailed build, again we're going to go through this piece by piece, but there's a lot of pieces, and so I'll do my best to walk through it slowly, and we'll take our time. To start, the shipbed 200 landing bay facing forward, so you'll board from the front. On either side we have these Deimos bumpers, and when you come into the landing bay you'll come straight into a 1x1 hab and immediately go up a ladder, which we'll see in a minute. Behind that are the Acculanders, and behind that is the Nova Cowling flipped backwards and flipped upside down. Attached to either side of our companionway are these NG-20 landing gear, highest landing thrust in the game you can get from Titan, Moon of Saturn. Behind those, these Stroud Cap A's, again flipped backwards and upside down. And same Stroud Cap A's, but now facing forward and upside down, and these Tayo Cowlings. This will form the base layer of our ship. Now another companionway right on top of the first one, and in front of that we have these Hope Tech companionways, which you can get from Hope Tech in the Valo system. These were kind of fun. I really haven't used these on many of my ships. It doesn't make for an efficient interior, but it is kind of a cool spine look for this ship to get up to the front and where the cockpit sits. Now these Ulysses tanks on either side, these are the second most efficient fuel tanks in the game. And some of these structural pieces on the front, and then this Deimos Skeg A piece underneath gets us that kind of pointed look, the beak, if you will, of the Warbird. Now our bridge, the Kontiki bridge, you'll see enters actually from underneath, and you can get this from Stroud Eklund. in the Nerion system. And to fill out that backspace, I've got another companionway. And then on top of that, another 2x1. Again, choose whatever types of habs you want. And on either side, to get the rounded look, we've got these Nova cowlings. I really went through a lot of different versions of the front of this ship. I felt like this was the best overall look, but it's tough to get that rounded head of the Warbird to look just right. Now, coming off the top of this, let's bring these pieces forward. Off of the front, we've got a Nova cowling. Give us kind of the top spine, and these HopeTech pipes, which these actually have connector points on the bottom, which is nice because we'll use another one of these Deimos skegs to give us kind of a more rounded rather than sharp look. And then 2 more habs. These are control stations, again, just to get more crew slots. You can't actually reach these with your character, but your crew could spawn into them. So we're getting more crew space on our ship, but you can't actually navigate to these. Now, if you wanted to, you could probably swap out some hab pieces to get into those, but it would change the look of your ship, so it's up to you. And then the Deimos cowling on the back starts to get us to the tail. Alright, now for kind of the top and the wings. This is where things get a little more complicated. So, we've got our reactor and grav drive up here. In front of those sits another one of these Deimos cowlings, just to get us kind of a rounded look. A reactor and grav drive, and some more Deimos cowlings in the back. And our shield too. Now on either side, we've got these shroud caps. And those sit on just on either side there. So now we're starting to get the shape. Now actually underneath these, each of those shroud caps are the same piece but flipped upside down. And those actually fit in there right next to those Nova cowlings without having to glitch them. And then the Deimos bellies flip backwards. So we're starting to get to the wings here, but these pieces connect just underneath. They're twin pieces just flipped upside down. Now the wings, we're actually going to start at the bottom because that's how they actually connect to this ship. They don't connect from the top, they connect from the bottom. So we're going to use, again, another shroud cap, and it's going to sit right on top of that shroud cap we put on the bottom. Just flipped the other way. And then our cargo piece. You could use the Taio mid-cap here, it's the same shape, but I wanted to get some cargo. And then a HopeTech nose flipped backwards just to kind of round out the back edge of that. Now building off of that, we're going to again go back to the shroud cap A piece, but again it's going to be flipped backwards and upside down. And another one just faced forward but upside down. And these are going to connect to the side connectors here. And actually, I think they do need to be maybe 1 notch forward. Yeah. Let's move them 1 notch forward to get kind of the swept forward wing look. Just like that. Now, sitting on top of those, we've got our engines. So 3 of these SA 4330s, you can get these from Stroud Eklund. And just to prove it to you, I'll move one at a time and show you that without glitching, these slot right in front of each other. You'll see there's various kind of orientations of these. This is the orientation you want, with those connector points facing outward, so you can put on a weapon mount or this equipment mount with our missile launchers. And we can have 3 on this side and 3 on the other, without glitching them in. And then in front of that is our Nova weapon mount with the rest of our particle beams. Sitting on top of those, more of the Stroud Cap A's. Just right on top, oriented just on top of the other ones that were on the bottom. And again, similar, we've got Stroud Cap A flipped upside down, and a Deimos belly piece to get us that wing shape. And on top of that, another Stroud Cap A right on top, and the Deimos cowling flipped backwards to complete our wing. So you see the top of the wing doesn't actually connect to the top of the ship, but it looks like it does. It's kind of seamless. Now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Again, Stroud Cap A right on top of the bottom one we placed. Cargo and Hope Tech nose. Connecting to those, we've got two of these Stroud Cap A's flipped upside down. And again, we've got a particle beam underneath there too. This will sit a bit forward for that swept forward wing look. And then connected to these, on top of them, we've got the engines. You know, see, I went with kind of a neon green colorway for these, just to kind of approximate that energy look. You can color them however you'd like. See if I can grab that. There we go. More Stroud Cap A's. This time right side up, but again oriented the same as the ones underneath the engines. And a couple more here to complete our wing look. Now you'll notice I've got a bunch of these structural pieces that I still haven't put on yet. These go kind of in the middle of the ship, and were kind of fun to play around with just to get the look of that middle negative space underneath there of the Warbird, to kind of fill that out and make it kind of clean, as well as to connect the tail in the back. So these don't really connect to each other so much, other than the tail here. So you see another one of these Deimos skegs that sits just a bit forward, just to get us kind of an initial rounded look as we sweep back to the tail. And then these Deimos spine pieces, these do connect to each other, so they stack. And we've got 3 of these on the back here to connect our tail. And just so that's not so abrupt as it connects to the bottom of the ship, I've got this Hope Tech Cap B, which sits right in front on top of that Nova cowling. And then some of these Deimos spine pieces, which just gives kind of that nice shape, as nice as we can get anyway, to the tail and to the interior of this kind of negative space. So this Deimos spine G keeps that seam kind of running through the center of the ship, and this Deimos spine A aft brings that together and connects it to those Hope Tech caps. On either side, some of these Hope Tech caps here. You'll see this sits in the front, kind of sloping down and forward. Just duplicate that, put one on the other side. Which I guess I had one over here, so we'll delete that. And then a flipped version of some of these. These all sit on these other connector points you'll see. Again, just to kind of fill out this space and approximate the interior of the Warbird here. You see, once we've placed these, that's it for this build. Again, pretty intricate, a lot of pieces. We're nearly at the module cap that the shipbuilder lets you build with. But I was pretty pleased at how this came together. A lot of trial and error in this one, but it's a pretty fun one to fly too, and looks really cool in the, I was going to say in the air, but in space. and also a deadly ship to cross paths with.
We are the Borg. Lower your shields and surrender your ships. We will add your biological and technological distinctiveness to our own. Your culture will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile.
And last, certainly not least, the Borg Cube. This one was much more difficult to build than I anticipated. I've seen some other cubes that folks have built, and I actually wanted this to be a bit bigger. I started with it being 6x6, but quickly hit the part limit builder, or part limit cap, and so I had to scale it back to 5x5, and then as you see here, what is actually a 5x4, but I put on some of these Deimos structural pieces and wing pieces on either left and right side to widen it out just a little bit. So start with the Pinch 8Z reactor. Again, you could use the Pinch 8A for the higher health points. This is the Pinch 8Z just for the additional power to allocate primarily to my weapons. Large grav drive, just fill up space, and the Assurance 1800 shield for that max shield health. Now I do have one Poseidon engine in here. I wasn't concerned about mobility or top speed. This thing's just going to sit still and destroy ships with its particle beams. So PBO 100 turrets, particle beams. We've also got the Obliterator 250 alpha turrets and the PBO 300 particle beam turrets. So complete turret loadout, all auto firing, just power them up and watch them destroy. Now for this build, we're going to go one layer at a time, and the main thing about this is randomness. You'll see here this bottom layer is probably the most critical. We're going to start with this landing bay right in the middle, which goes into a companionway hab, and then the docker. So all those are on the bottom. Try to tuck those away and hide them. And then a bunch of the NG-20 landing gear throughout just to get enough landing thrust, which again, you can get these from Titan, Moon on Saturn. The rest of this build was predominantly just picking random pieces. So if the idea of the Borg is that they've assimilated all the various cultures, then they should have access to all the various ship manufacturing parts. And so I really tried to just use all the different parts and arrange them in as random of a way as I could to try and get that look of the Borg Cube and not have it be have repetitive patterns in it. That was really my goal. I think I ended up accomplishing that. Now again, I wish I could make it larger, but we're limited by the shipbuilder currently in the game. Now these HopeTech Hab spines that you see come directly from the HopeTech ship technician, which is in the Valo system. So you have to go there to get those. Most of the rest of these parts, other than those NG-20 landing gear, can be found at your outpost landing pad. So you get most of these parts there, except for some of these HopeTech specific pieces. Now I did throw some of these Deimos wings on the sides, again in basically a random fashion, just to try to break up the look a little bit, get some additional lines, but not have one continuous line running the length of the ship. Was really my goal. And so a bunch of random pieces in here. Again, you could build this exactly as I have, or again, randomness is your friend here. But the 4x5 layout was what I ended up having to go to just to get, just stay under that maximum part limit. This is not a ship that I would recommend trying to spend much time walking around the inside of. As you probably guessed, it was actually just a bit of a challenge to avoid the error that you cannot access the cockpit from the landing bay. So I had to be really intentional about that. But I really didn't care about walking around in the interior. Again, I was focused on the randomness of the pieces. So layer by layer, we'll put this together. I also got some of these HopeTech Companionway HABs, which again come straight from the HopeTech vendor in the Valo system. For the cockpit, you'll see I've got that Magellan cockpit, really just because it's flat enough that you can sandwich it underneath, above and underneath two other HAB pieces, and so it fits nicely. And I did put a window in that HAB in the interior because if I fast travel into my cockpit and then exit out, stand up from the seat, I can walk back and look to the inside of my ship, which is kind of unique. But otherwise, I don't attempt to walk around this ship and the inside at all. It's just not even worth trying. Now we'll keep going, a few layers left. Again, all these various HABs, unless you want to go with a 2x2 or a 3x2 HAB, for those specifically you'll need to visit the specific ship vendor for those pieces. Otherwise, these, anything that's an X1, 2x1, 1x1, 3x1, you can get from your outpost landing pad, as well as most of these structural pieces, except for these HopeTech cross braces or spines. Now you notice I really don't care about mobility on this ship. You could put even more cargo on instead of, you know, some of these HABs. I did put some on, which you'll notice as we go along. You could max it out. I think the limit that you're going to run into is your landing thrust with your landing gear. So you could probably add a little bit more landing gear around the edges of this if you wanted to on that bottom layer, just to get more cargo. Again, up to you. And your weapons loadout is, you know, up to you as well. Being that I didn't care about mobility, this is all about turrets and just letting the cube take care of itself, or I should say the hive mind, because no one can really compete with it. Now this big fuel tank, just to get us enough fuel, it's one of the most efficient, I think it's the most efficient fuel tank in the game as far as fuel to mass. And then on this top layer, you'll notice I actually have a few more of these kind of smaller structural pieces, specifically these HopeTech caps. You see I got this Nova radiator here. Again, the intention is just to break up the repetitive patterns that you would get if you just did all HABs. So that's the goal. Be random. Because while the Borg probably aren't random in what they do, the look of the cube is very much random looking. Now with these, I'll have to place these one at a time because they don't actually connect to each other like these HAB pieces do. So with these, I can kind of select a big chunk at one time and move them all together. But with some of those HopeTech cap pieces, some of those other smaller structural pieces, they just sit right on top of the layer beneath them. And so we'll have to probably move some of them one at a time here. once you get these placed, that'll wrap up this build. This has been a fun one, more fun than I expected to fly, to just drop into a system and let it obliterate or assimilate any challengers. I hope you enjoy these builds. These have been really fun for me. And until next time, keep building.